you got no way to believe you're going to have help. And that's the way the Pilgrims are.
Yeah.
They've been staying here for 30 days. And then they travel down here and they land. And no earthly human had any earthly way to know that's where they're going to land. And what do you think happens? A Native American meets them on the beach and begins speaking in English. What? And he leaves them and he goes and comes back a couple of days later, and he's got another Indian brother named Squanto. Are the lights going on yet? Anybody's?
Yeah.
Squanto was a Native American who, on an earlier voyage, a captain on one of these sea ships had taken him, hijacked him, I don't know what happened, took him to England, and he got some education and he learned to speak English, and they put him in servitude. He got away, got to a ship, and another ship took him back to America and got him to where he was from in the beginning. Now that by itself is a story. That by itself is a blow your mind story. Yeah. But the man that they meet speaks English. He had to have learned it from Squanto. By the way, I don't know if I can find it in my notes because I'm carried away now. Squanto was a Abenaki Indian from that tribe. Squanto was from the Pawtucket tribe. They're from two different tribes. So God sends an Indian from one tribe who speaks English to go get another Indian from another tribe, and the other Indian from the other tribe comes up, and now they have a friend on the beach. These people come aboard, and now they have a friend. Can you imagine how incredibly crazy that would be? How encouraged would you be if half of your family was dead? And you're thinking maybe you're next, and you come on, and there's an Indian speaking English who gets another Indian who knows everything about everything, and this other Indian takes them and hooks them up to the local tribe and connects them in. See, you couldn't have just gone in and said, well, I know an Indian somewhere and I want to be associated with your tribe. That ain't going to happen. But that is exactly what happened. The Winnipeg, I can't read my writing. It's something like that. The other tribe. Squanto began to teach the Pilgrims. Now they're in trouble. They're in trouble. Now it's March. The weather's still probably not very great. And they got no homes. They got nothing that they need much. And Squanto begins to teach them how to catch fish out of the river, how the Indians do it. See, now it's a big deal. Living off grid and homesteading. You can get on YouTube and look up living off grid and homesteadings and watch something till this time next week and not see it all. There's lots of it. That's the thing now among many people. But these people came and they didn't know how to do any of that stuff. And the Indians taught them how to take what's on the land, use what's on the land, and catch fish out of the rivers. Taught them how to cultivate corn. Taught them how to extract maple sap to make maple syrup. I mean, isn't that cool? And taught them how to avoid the poisonous plants and how to use the beneficial plants. If you and I were dropped off there right now without anything, we would need to know everything they did. Because I can catch a fish, but I'm not going to have all my rods and reels. And I can make corn grow, but I'm not going to have corn seed. And I'm not going to have the way to till. And I'm not going to have any of those things. And I wouldn't have a clue how to start extracting maple syrup, even know which one a maple tree was. And God provided all of that. What I want you to see out of this, and I'm going to go on and tell the rest of the story, but what I want you to see out of this is if God's hand had not been with the Pilgrims, they would have come to nothing.
Sure.
They would have come to naught.
Yeah.
Listen to what happens. In November of 1621, so now this is in March, and now they've had help, they've planted, now they've got a harvest. In 1621, their governor's name was named William Bradford. And he proclaimed a celebration to celebrate the goodness of God. And they invited the Indian, who I can't think of his name already, Squanto, and the whole tribe. Well, the tribe came with 90 men, 90 warriors, and their chief, a man named Massasoit, which I remember that name. They ate and feasted for 3 days. Just before they came, the governor Bradford sent out 4 men to go a-fowling. And that's out bringing us back some meat. And they said that they had such success that they had food that they could have fed the people for a week. I don't know what they got. Now, we like to think it was all wild turkeys. And it could have been some wild turkey, but it was probably some ducks and some geese. It may have been some birds that we don't eat now, but they came back and they had plenty. These men came, when the Braves, they left out some of them, and they came back with 5 deer. And they presented the deer to the leaders. And then they butchered them and began to cook and divide. One of the men who was there, I don't know if I can find it I don't think I'm techy enough to find it on my phone fast enough. If I could read it to you. I don't think I can. He wrote in his diary, in effect, that we had such food, we had such drink, we had such abundance, that would to God that everybody had been with us on that day. These are people that had known what it is to starve to death. They had known what it is to see people waste away. And now on this Thanksgiving, they've got so much food that even they and 90 braves, they can't eat it all. And he said, would to God that everybody would share it with us in that bounty that day. It's interesting. Do you know when the second Thanksgiving was? You're not going to get this. This was in 1621. When would you think the second Thanksgiving would be? 1622, you would think. But they didn't have the celebration on 1622. But in 1623, there came a devastating drought. Drought has a way to make you thankful when in the end you have food. And during this drought, they proclaimed a time of fasting, and that God would give them a crop. And when God gave them the crop, then they had their second Thanksgiving on actually the 3rd year. You know, the scripture says, and I just read it last week, Moses was telling the people, now when you're living in houses you haven't built, drinking from cisterns that you didn't dig, drinking, the grapes from the vineyards that you didn't plant, you be careful, because it's easy to take those things for granted. And I can't tell you that they did that, but I can tell you that they didn't have the Thanksgiving feast the second year, after the drought, after the fast. And God answered, then they had their second Thanksgiving. From after that time, there are a lot of things that could be said about the history of Thanksgiving, but most of it, I think, for purposes today, don't necessarily need to be said. Except, I'll give you a few highlights. After the American Revolution, the Congress proclaimed a day of Thanksgiving. That was the first time that our government of any kind had done it. In that was during the Revolution. In 1789, George Washington, our first president, made a proclamation. And here's what he said. This is what he said in writing, and I wrote it down. A proclamation to express their gratitude for the happy conclusion to the country's war of independence and the successful ratification of the U.S. Constitution. oftentimes fasting was associated with Thanksgiving. And we don't associate fasting with Thanksgiving. After him, John Adams, after James Madison, did the same thing. In 1817, the state of New York was the first state to officially adapt it as an ongoing holiday. In 1827, there was a magazine writer, and she began a campaign that would take 36 years of her life to try to get Thanksgiving to be a national campaign. I can't believe I did not write her name down, but I can tell you one of her most famous works was a poem. Mary had a little lamb, whose fleece was white as snow. In 1863, she finally prevailed, and Abraham Lincoln, at the height of the Civil War, in a proclamation, entreated all, and I wrote down what he asked. He had a proclamation entreating all Americans to ask God to commend to his tender care all those who had become widows and orphans, mourners or sufferers in the lamentable civil strife, and to heal the wounds of the nation. Thanksgiving was scheduled then, after that, for the 4th Thursday in November.